Welcome back, everybody. What's up?
Welcome back.
Hey,
Hello.
welcome.
So we're going to do another one of these. Last time we did one, we do about every month, roughly. Last time we missed our friend Kelley. She was absent from that one. Hope you brought a
Yeah.
note. Do you have a doctor's note, Kelley?
I do actually. I was like, hey, I had a really special event. I'm going to get in big trouble. I will no longer be allowed to be in this friend group. And they were like, I totally understand. Here you go.
We're very particular and picky, obviously,
Mhm.
You are.
and we
Clearly
do
demanding.
readily eject people from the
Oh,
friend
yeah, you
group.
seem very elitist for sure.
We've ejected people from the friend group for far less, just
Yeah.
Anyway, joining me as always, Lauren Rosen, Kelley Franke, two spectacular OCD specialists from Southern California and host of the Purely OCD podcast. So there.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having us aboard. If any of you are visiting from our end, that guy is Drew Linsalata. Obviously, this is his channel. He's awesome. He writes books. He's in school for to become a therapist himself, actually, and will be a wonderful addition to the field.
Pretty good, as long as they don't get ejected from the friend group before then.
Well, no guarantees, man. Sorry.
Let's go. Tough room.
What
So,
do I do?
anyway, today we are going to be talking about why the words we choose in recovery kind of matter. And I think this is a great topic that we made up 10 minutes ago. So,
Yeah, it's true.
Mhm.
It was only about 10, 15 minutes ago.
pretty much. Who wants to open this? Lauren, I think it was yours, right?
Yes, I guess it was my, yeah. Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways in which the words we use impact recovery.
Mhm.
And I think the one that I threw out was the I can't versus I won't, although there are countless other examples.
Mhm.
But yeah, just the idea that oftentimes we'll hear people who are in recovery say things like, well, I can't do that. Or my one of the sort of ways that this is manifested is like, oh, well, my OCD or my anxiety kept me from doing X.
Mm.
And it's a problem, right? It completely strips us of our power and our ability to change.
Mhm.
Is that a thing you guys would challenge when your clients bring that to you? The language?
Yeah. I mean, because it's the flexibility piece, right? It's like if we say we can't, then there's no room for future growth or flexibility in any way. And also there's a part of like owning it, right? Like having ownership in I am just not willing to do it right now,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, right
Okay.
now. That's the best part of that. Right now. It's
Right
okay.
now,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay. Well, how can we make steps towards that? And it just keeps the conversation going for growth and change versus just shutting it down right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I can't.
Right.
Yeah.
The other one, what Lauren, you mentioned my anxiety kept me from or made me. Anxiety made me do this. That's another one.
Yeah. Which is sort of, you can kind of see how it's an iteration of that, right? Like I couldn't say no, or I had to do this because of the fact. Yeah. But I think in that, oh shoot, I was going to say something and it's gone. Bam.
Mm.
Out of the friend group. That's it.
Done.
Mhm.
I'm out.
You're getting the cut, man. Too many times.
It
Yeah.
happens.
Well, go ahead. Did you get that thought or no?
No.
All right.
Gone.
So there's my anxiety made me, or I couldn't do that, which is extension of can't. Another one that I like to attack sometimes because I'm that way is XYZ makes me anxious. Usually it's coffee makes me anxious.
Mm.
Does it? Or does it change the way your body feels?
I like that.
Right. Well, and even down to thoughts too.
Mhm.
Oh, well, that thought made me anxious. It's like, well, it's actually kind of your interpretation of the thought that made you
Yeah.
that led to the anxiety, or that created the anxiety, or
Yeah.
that trigger made me anxious. It's like, well, the interpretation of it is really what we're talking about there.
Yeah. Which is
Yeah.
really nuanced, but I think that matters.
It does. It comes off as if we're being nitpicky, but in reality, we're not. It's like truly, shockingly, there's a lot of research that shows that how we talk to ourselves really matters. That we start to internalize that voice, right? If we're constantly critiquing ourselves or beating ourselves up, it's like, well, not surprising, that doesn't go well, and we have low self-confidence. So
Not
why
an
would it be
effective
any
strategy.
different if we're saying I can't? Or even with children, if you hear them saying like, I don't know how to do that. Okay, so then that's like saying I can't do it. Is like, well, right now in this moment you don't know how to, and we're going to learn how to do that.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that yet, or I can't.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that yet. Then that's okay, because we are going to learn.
Yeah.
It came back to me. The thing earlier.
Oh, thank God.
Am I going to be back in the friend group? Hopefully.
On the eject button. You're lucky.
So I think part of the reason that it's difficult, whether we're talking about straight up saying I can't do something versus I'm not willing at this point, or putting it on the the anxiety sort of made me do this, or I couldn't resist, is I think part of the reason that that's a go-to is that it's the element of self-compassion is so difficult for people.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, holding oneself accountable while also being kind, right? Like that's a very delicate balance to keep. And if you can't hold both of those, then of course you're going to say, oh, well, I had no choice, because the other alternative is to beat the living pulp out of yourself. And so making space for there to be like, oh, well, I'm working on this and I'm making progress in this way, or I'm willing to do this and I'm working toward my willingness to do this, is a really, I think that's an antidote to that issue.
Yeah, you're probably right. It lets yourself off the hook to a certain extent.
Yeah. Which if you can't be kind to yourself while you're on the hook, then
when can you?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would lock you into, there's that argument. And I think, so I'll make 2 points here. One is that if you're going to stick to the old language, I can't, it made me, it does this, it, not me, it. Okay, fair enough. But it's really hard to say, hey, Lauren, hey, Kelley, help me. But I'm also going to stay locked in that language that negates all the help that you're giving me.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that that's a tough one? That's a tough place to be in. Like, you're not giving yourself a chance.
Absolutely.
You have to at least be open to the idea that maybe a change of language could be something you should at least try.
Right.
Yes? Yeah.
Yeah.
And one way we do that too is just in session ourselves, is when somebody's challenging something or they're doing an exposure, or it's not necessarily like correcting them every single time, although I might do that at time when there's a really strong language that's going on. But just how we speak to our clients is over time learning, because we are going to hold you accountable, yet do it in a really compassionate way.
Mm-hmm.
And we will use that language so that eventually it will start to kind of sink in. It's like, well, then what got in the way this time? Okay, so let's talk about it. And not judging, not saying what's wrong with you. And a lot of times clients will go, I didn't want to come to session because, and I think we've actually had a whole conversation on this, but I didn't want to come to session because I didn't do my homework. And I thought that you would judge me, right? Zero judgment.
Yeah.
Let's actually find a way to look what happened, what got in the way, how can we troubleshoot it? So then they go, oh, wow, maybe this is how we talk to people, right?
Ourselves included. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny because some of that language, it's not only on it's not only on the client side, it can be on the helper side.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
use ridiculous, horrible, cliches like we'd never fail. We either win or learn.
Ugh.
And that's horrible, but it's
I know.
true. And
true.
It sort of encourages that change of language. Like, stop saying you failed. What can you learn in that situation? Yeah, as long as you learn something, there's no fail. And I do believe
there really isn't. I believe it so strongly.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah. Having that growth mindset is so key to the recovery process.
It is true.
Seeing every sort of pitfall or thing that you might see as a failure as actually the impetus for growth. Like, it's not even just seeing as not a problem, but as necessary and fundamental to the process.
Yeah.
It has to be.
So I think people would then tend to ask, like, okay, so if we just start talking about it different, well, that changes everything. Well, not necessarily, but I think some of the stuff that you were talking about before, like, we are giving up your power. If you just say, I can't, Okay, well, you're giving up your power and your agency. And that comes in the realization where the language might give you a chance to distance a little bit from the crisis so that you can slice those time slices into tiny, tiny slices.
Mhm.
Know that there's a small slice between the stimulus and the response that you get to act in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And changing the language tends to shoehorns you into that moment where you can make a choice where you thought there was no choice. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I totally agree. And I think it's almost like it's an element, it's an interrupting element. If you know that you have this tendency to say, I can't, and you have that sort of awareness that you're cultivating, then you hear yourself say it, you're going to go, wait a second, it's an indicator to me that I need to sort of take a look at what's going on right now.
Yep.
So it's not even necessarily about the words themselves, but about recognizing where the messages that you're handing yourself all the time are sort of thoughtless potentially and are contributing to the problem.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm looking
Yeah.
for a quote, by the way, that I think is going to be true.
Oh, I think I have it in my office. Is it the Viktor Frankl quote?
No, it's not a Victor.
Oh.
It's a different book, Chatter by Ethan Cross. Did you guys
Oh,
read Chatter?
Mm-mm.
I haven't read it, but I've read parts of it. It's
Yeah, I'm a
cool.
big fan. He does this whole thing about third party speak, where you talk
Oh.
about yourself in the third party. And this, again, he's not just making it up. There's a fair amount of research, some of which he did himself, that talks about that. He calls it distancing. So sometimes changing the language really matters, and that people who talk about themselves in the third party and reference themselves, not so like, oh, what's going on? It's, come on, Drew, you can do this. I might say to myself, it actually seems to make a difference. Like, we can validate that empirically. So yeah, you can see why the words and the way you talk about it can make a difference. It's really interesting.
Right.
That's super interesting. I love that.
And it can be framed in the self-compassion piece too, right? Is like, I'm here for you. I know you can do this. Even that language can be.
Yeah, they call it linguistic immersion. So if you're going to always say, I can't, I felt, I did, that's a tough spot. But if you start to talk about yourself in the third person, as silly as that might sound, because we don't normally do that, you distance yourself from that immersion and you get a little bit of space that you can work in. So to me, fascinating.
I love
I'm
that.
having this epiphany moment of, I guess it's not an epiphany, but a thought around, I wonder if having a client write a letter to self for something that they're feeling really stuck on.
Oh, letter to themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see
Like,
that.
I know you don't want to do this because it's so uncomfortable and it's painful. And it's almost like this self-compassion letter
Yeah.
that could be probably empowering depending on who you're doing it with, I guess. But
Yeah, it might be, because if I watch, I mean, I don't want to watch you struggling, my friends, but if I was watching you struggle, I watch from a distance. So I get a little bit of objectivity. If I'm struggling, I have no distance. So that right to yourself, talking to third party helps give you that little bit of break.
I want to read that book. I'm curious.
I know, it's
You
so
guys
cool.
Yeah, it is
Chatter.
Yeah, Chatter. Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially all about how conventional wisdom says, go inside and tap into your inner voice. But we all know that in this environment, that goes way off the rails. And way off the rails. He wrote about it. It's really fascinating. It's a good book. Quick read too. You'll get through it.
And does he give you examples of like how to do it?
Yeah. He uses some really interesting examples. One of the cool things was getting into an awestruck state where they use nature as part of the therapeutic process. So if you put yourself in the middle of like Zion National Park, it's beautiful. You're awestruck. You are outside of yourself instantly, and your struggles are distant now. And the difference is that some of the studies that have been run with like combat veterans with PTSD, like the difference is astounding. And it's all about interrupting that internal, like go inside and chatter with myself. Talks about co-rumination, why we think commiserating with each other it's supposed to be good, right? That has a limit, and then it goes bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's a lot about this, what we're talking about today, the language matters.
That's so interesting, because when I was on my journey of recovery through trauma work, I think being in nature was the key element to it. Is I was really in the moment.
Yeah. And out of your own head.
Yeah. I was like in it. I was looking at all the beautiful, being curious about everything. It was it was a break from my mind. So yeah.
There's such a clear element of connection in that
grounded.
Gets you outside of yourself, to Drew's point.
You get away from the I speak and you start speaking, or at least engaging linguistically, or well, the relational frame theory, here it comes
Mhm.
with the outside world. I had to explode. Anyway, wow, we went off on a tangent. Not a book review, I
Sorry.
promise, but
Yeah.
I got us there. I threw us.
We're not. No, it's
Well, but bringing it back to where I think it started with like getting outside of yourself, like, and how that element when you brought in Nathan Cross's book is like, um when you are talking to other people generally, I find it's sort of when you're trying to reflect on what your genuine values are or the way that you want to behave in a situation, it's so much clearer to see in terms of how you treat other people. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that like that third person language is so helpful in that, because we are generally kinder, and because of that objectivity, so sort of channeling that and saying like,
Mhm.
oh, this is really hard for you right now, or I see, and I guess that's actually second person language technically, but do you know what I mean, like having some sort of space between like talking to yourself as though you are somebody else
Mhm.
is going to maybe give you it's going to hook you into how you want to be as a person versus the patterns that you have been practicing for a long time that are ingrained and that are oftentimes related to fear of judgment and wanting to do it by everybody else's rules, not your own.
Fair
Mhm.
enough. Yeah, yeah. It's easy to be kind to other people. We never be kind. We're never kind to ourselves. Why? So that's
Yeah.
that's a really good point. What about not just the words themselves or the linguistic choices, but I also think the frequency of the amount that you talk about this tends to be an issue too. How
Mhm.
often, and I always tell people, like in the thick of it, I would have told anybody with 2 ears and a half a second how I was feeling. Like I would want to tell everybody because that was just the most important thing in the room all the time.
Mm.
How do you get people out of that rut?
Are you talking about when you with OCD or panic or
Yeah, I
what
think kind of all of those things. Like it just becomes the most important topic in my life, and I just want to talk about it constantly to anybody who will listen. That's a tough
Yeah.
place to be too. That's a language thing.
And I would say it's getting too much airtime, right? Because we're putting it on a pedestal
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
we're saying this is the most important thing, which then says, "Oh, right, we have no power over this." Right?
Yeah.
Instead of taking action and steps that try to treat this instead of just talking. Like, let's take action instead.
yeah,
Well,
and
It
and
almost becomes compulsive talking about it, right?
yeah, it kind of does. If you're well, you guys know you have an audience
Yeah.
as well. You know what it sounds. You know what the comment section looks like. So
yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
not a bad thing. I mean, I was there too. We all went. We were all
All of us, yeah.
there. Yeah,
Absolutely.
But this is the problem with traditional psychotherapy in this context as well, is that the idea, we look back to Freud and the idea of abreaction, right? I mean, I have a cathartic emotional experience by reliving this challenging thing, and then I'll get over it, right? Like then I'll be free of it and we can move on with our lives. It's like the idea
Yeah.
that like if we grieve properly, then we can sort of move on. And generally speaking, it's not as limited as that. We like there's almost something addictive about wanting to go back over it because it's going to give this release that you can kind of become hooked on like that relief or release or whatever that catharsis is, versus saying like, no, this is going to be part of the experience. And I don't necessarily want to give it as much airtime or talk about it as much because I've got other more important things going on, and then starting to center other things in your life is probably actually going to promote you moving forward,
yeah,
even
Mhm.
with all of that experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think and that compulsion to talk about it all the time is almost justified by sort of that Freudian thing that was built 100 and some odd years. No, we have to talk it out. Talking about your things is good, right? That's good.
Right.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
always. Yeah, not
No.
No, actually, getting to living our life is the most important thing in this instance,
yeah,
and that
Yeah.
might include not processing it by talking out loud
yeah.
around it.
An interesting thing come up that you guys might appreciate, the whole processing. I need to process it. I need to unpack it. And I always like to think, well, you know what? Right now, you can't unpack it.
Mm-mm.
You'll be able to unpack it when the day comes that you don't feel like you have to unpack it. Then you're probably
Yeah,
ready to unpack.
that's a good point.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
excellent point.
Totally.
And that might be a different type of processing than you expected. It might be more of like grieving
Sure.
or right, some type how it impacted your life and how you want to do things differently versus, oh my gosh, I can't handle this feeling.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting that we kind of took this turn here because it sort of speaks to one of the other language things that I think can be really problematic, which is that we don't necessarily, when we talk about thoughts and feelings, we often confuse the two, and also thinking. So in this is where the connection initially came about from what we were talking about is processing and feeling an emotion are two very different things. One is cognitive, it's thinking about the emotion, it's chatting about the emotion, and the other is actually being with the underlying physical sensations that comprise that emotion. And I think if we're saying, okay, we want you to accept your feelings, sometimes people then go, oh, well, then I'm supposed to process it a lot. I'm supposed to think about it a lot, which is not what we're talking about at all. But there's a couple in that realm. Like I'm having the thought that versus saying, I feel like that's a big one that I think can be super problematic because when you hear, I feel like it confers a certain amount of like importance to it. Like,
Totally.
oh, well, it feels that way, so it must be that way versus saying, I'm having the thought that this is the case and I feel anxious.
Yeah, I
Right?
notice I'm feeling anxiety come up when I'm
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've tried to get people to just do, and I'm thinking, end of story. I'm thinking, not I'm thinking about, or it feels like, or this means just I'm thinking, oh, I'm thinking again. Oh, I'm feeling. Yeah. I love that though, like processing, experiencing an emotion. One is an experience and one is an action. Like having an emotion is an experience. Processing an emotion is an action. Two different things.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's already like tons of mental compulsions going on that is an action as well. It's like this mental event.
Yes.
This is exhausting.
Yeah.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
But it's the difference
validate
between
that.
like processing it out loud versus processing it in your head. Like those are,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can even see where this discussion would fuel some like consternation now. Am I processing? Am I experiencing?
Oh,
Am I thinking? Like, oh, it's really hard. Just like,
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Let me throw a word out to be this way, get the crowd all riled up here. Here's a word that I would strike from the language. Well, there's a couple of words I would strike from language, but one of them, and this is, I know people don't really like when I say this, I would strike the word healing from the language temporarily. Temporarily, not permanently. Everybody's
Okay.
allowed to heal, and we probably all have some healing to do. But sometimes it makes me crazy when people talk about their anxiety recovery as a healing process. What if it's a learning process just as much as healing, or as opposed to healing? To me,
Yeah.
healing has a connotation that like there's some sort of thing that's broken I need to fix, or I have an impairment of some kind that I am trying to repair. And
Right.
I'm not sure that doesn't really put you in a good spot.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd just be me.
No, I can see that. And I wonder if part of that too is like that you're going to you're going to start resisting the experience because the experience needs to be changed. Like it kind of has that flavor of it in terms of like I have to heal from the anxiety or the feeling versus I'm actually trying to learn how to live with it. I can kind of see that being a part of what you're talking about, and also just the idea of like it's almost there's disruption in it more than healing necessarily, right? Like we're looking to actually like sort of drudge things up a little bit. So I can see where like
Totally.
that word is so sort of laden that it might be not as helpful.
I
Or
think
might be the wrong.
the word puts you behind the eight ball a little bit too, because if I break my leg, I might want to go to the gym to fix my leg, but I have to wait for it to heal because it is weak at the time. Sometimes when I'm trying to heal from anxiety, it automatically says that you're incapable in some way, or your capabilities are diminished. Your perceived state of being may be a state of well-being may be diminished, but are your capabilities really diminished? Because isn't that part of what's driving the avoidance anyway? The idea that I'm diminished, my capabilities are diminished.
Right.
Have to heal first.
I have to wait for the right time to get all of
Yeah.
this.
Right. Right.
Once all the ducks are in a row, then I can jump into my exposures.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's my little rant about healing. I like how you skillfully did not jump on my bandwagon, which is a big thumbs up. So like,
I don't
'cause-
know. I think I kind of did.
I know.
yeah,
I think
you
she
did a
did.
little bit, but yeah, no, I get it. I know sometimes people, and you know what? If you like the word healing, hey, don't let me take it.
You know, I don't think it comes up a lot in where
Mm.
I don't see that a lot. So I wonder if it's exclusive to
Maybe
maybe your Facebook groups or
or the,
something, or
yeah, I mean, I hear all the time, I'm healing my nervous system. I have to heal from anxiety. I'm on my healing journey from anxiety, and like, oh, okay,
That's where I was seeing it, is like this
yeah.
idea of like we have to resolve the experience. Like you're not supposed to feel anxiety at the end of this, and that's I will totally get on this bandwagon with you 1000%, is that it's
do it.
different from it is fundamentally different from going to the doctor and say like, okay, I have this broken arm we need to fix. It's like the end game there is for the arm to no longer be broken.
Mhm.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Kel,
And
take it.
well, no, and that's exactly, it's the opposite in a way. Is like we're actually saying we actually want to live with the broken arm. We want to learn to live with it. We want to learn to go to the gym, like you said,
Mhm.
True, and actually work with the broken arm. So it's like the metaphor, it only has a certain extent where it then starts to not work. Here is like we actually are learning how, like, healing, it's almost like we have to reinvent or give it a new definition, right? It's like healing actually means feeling anxiety.
Like
Yeah.
healing our relationship with anxiety as opposed to
Oh, that's
healing anxiety.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Healing is like, well, I have to rebuild my broken self, and like my assertion would be like, no, no, you're learning that you weren't nearly as broken as you
Yeah,
think.
you're learning.
Yes,
I do
Right.
like the learning
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
the
absolutely.
alternative language.
there you go. My work here is done. Clearly,
Yeah.
if I
Mic
change
drop.
one word for you today, let it be that.
Yeah.
We're about 26 minutes in. What do you got? You have anything else that you want to talk about? Language? We could probably talk about this for hours.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm sure.
for sure.
So what practical tips? Now I come into either one of you as a client, we have to try at least to give them one video where we give them something at the end where we solve the problem.
Do we not do that?
I'm convinced that at
No.
the end of every one of these videos, everybody's like, okay, but I still feel like crap. And they didn't fix that.
Okay, but that's the whole thing.
Thank you.
There it is like none of this is going to happen overnight too, right? Like I actually was going to end on this note,
Let's do it.
was okay, was that us saying, let's talk to ourselves nicely. Let's talk about willingness
Mm.
versus I can't. And all of those language things is like, you have to do that. You've been talking to yourself like shit for 20 years or 40 years. And now you're going to learn a whole new set of skills of like consciously redirecting and restating the statement and talking to ourselves kinder and holding ourselves accountable. It's not going to, you're just not going to feel better. It's not the one solution. And it's going to take a long time before you actually integrate that as, oh, this is how I talk to myself. I don't have to like stop and go, oh, I'm talking mean to myself. It's like, it's actually going to take a long time before you get there and it's integrated.
Yeah,
And it's not going to happen overnight with all the stuff we talk about.
that's
Mm.
true. Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
shift like anything else. It's going to take some time and practice. You're going to get it wrong. You're going to fall back into old habits. That's just the way it is. That's how we're wired.
Yeah.
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 I love that.
It's not going to be just this one aha moment where you're like, oh, I'm all better now.
If only.
Oh,
Yeah.
self-compassion. Boom. Fixed.
Yeah, there
Right?
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
There's
piece
the
I'm
difference
missing?
between the cognitive understanding and the experiential learning that
Oh,
Yes.
happens is
The
like that it is much
integration.
if it were just down to a book, then one person would have written a book and then we'd all be, nobody would ever need anybody else or any other help or support.
yeah. So when you
Yeah.
find yourself talking in cruel ways to yourself, you know what the answer to that is. This aggression will not stand, man.
This aggression will not stand.
I know by the way that you said that has to be a
You knew that I was
Lebowski
setting it
quote.
up, right?
It will not stand, man.
This will not stand, man. Anyway, thanks everybody.
Can I throw one other thing
Oh, yeah, you
out as
can.
an addition to all of this is that going back to Drew's point earlier, it's the words. We don't want to be pedantic here. We're not trying to be nitpicky, and you don't have to get perfectionistic about using the right words. That's not like the point of this conversation. The point is to look at maybe what you're assuming to be truth, and how, like, that the easiest way to catch that is reflected in the language that we use. And so if it's like, I can't, it's not, oh, well, that's a bad word and you should never use it. It's an identifier to me that you're operating through this lens of like almost a victim consciousness versus a growth mindset, and that we probably want to look at that. So because people can turn all of these things into like black and white, to really recognize that like this conversation is actually just more about awareness and developing awareness of what your language could be telling you, rather than like you should never use that word. Right. So,
or being prescriptive. We're not trying to be prescriptive here. Say these words.
Yeah. No, not at all.
No.
Yeah. Fair
No.
enough. Very good. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Let me put everybody up on the screen here. Lauren, you're not on my screen anymore. Let's put
I'm not.
So if you want to find these two fine human beings, you can find Kelley here at the OCD Therapist. And Lauren is at the Obsessive Mind. By the time I type it, everybody will go away anyway, so I can't.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
And you should be listening to Purely OCD, which is Lauren and Kelley's podcast. It's really good.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for having us again and not ejecting us out of the friendship.
Well, yeah. Did I make it? Are we okay?
You did.
You made it all
the way. Almost didn't, Lauren. He lost your name on his.
I mean, he did. He deleted it. He was like
halfway there, man.
I believe that you were actually booted by Nathan Peterson a few weeks ago.
Oh, Nathan.
Nathan's a good dude, though. So, like, if you're going to be booted, you'd be booted by Nathan.
Yeah. No,
that's true. It's a good replacement.
I'm honored. I'm honored to be booted by Nathan.
All right, folks. Awesome. Thanks for coming on, hanging out with us. If you have more comments or questions, just keep posting them here on YouTube. And if need be, I will drag Kelley and Lauren back in to answer them. I ain't letting you talk. So,
love being dragged.
Yeah.
See you next time. We're out.
Bye.